are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 129. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello everybody and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about guilt and feeling guilty. So let me ask you this. Are you sick of feeling guilty? As in constantly guilty, or pretty much constantly guilty, right? Guilty for not figuring out your drinking, which means guilt for all the other things that this touches in your life, right? For not being present when you're with the people you love, for not doing a good enough job at work or at home, guilt for saying no, for not being available, for not meeting other people's expectations, for disappointing them, for letting them down, for wanting more for yourself, and for letting yourself down. All of those things we can apply if we have the filter of guilt over them for your relationship with alcohol. That's what we're talking about today. And if feeling guilty is starting to feel like it's just your way of life, there are 2 things I want you to know. Yes, I'm keeping things very simple this week. So I want you to have the real nuts and bolts of this. First, your guilt is not caused by your actions. Your guilt is not caused by what you do or what you fail to do, however much you might think that. That latter one was particularly one of mine. Your guilt is not caused by other people either. Nobody else's opinion of you can make you feel guilty. I want you to hear me on that. People guilting you or guilt tripping you, as my children might say, is not a thing. Your husband guilting you into going alcohol free tonight like you said you would, even when you're trying to change your mind about not having the wine, or perhaps your friends saying stuff that makes you feel awful about why you haven't got this figured out already, right? None of that stuff causes your guilt. So, my dear friends, you have my permission right now to just let that stuff go. In fact, I'm going to pause a beat to let you think about that and to let you consciously decide that we're just going to let that type of feeling of guilt go. Now, you know I like to keep things simple. So let's now talk about what does make you feel guilty, where our guilt comes from, where it always comes from, and the only place it comes from. There is just one. There's one place, and it is your thoughts. Yes, those pesky thoughts again. But it isn't just, if we say your thoughts, so what does that mean, Anna? I mean, really, that sounds just like the answer to everything. Side note, it is the answer to a lot of things, but let's dig into that. So we have, firstly, your thoughts about your past. These I find to be the most well-rehearsed and often the most ones that we believe, and the most insidious and sneaky as well. So thoughts along something like, you should have done something differently to the way that you did it. Perhaps you're feeling guilt that you should never have started drinking so young. Perhaps you feel guilty that you should have made different choices earlier on as to how you relax, because then you wouldn't be stuck with this habit, right? Maybe it can even be our thoughts about what we did yesterday. I feel guilty because I was going to try and do my plan and I didn't. And now I feel awful about the things I said. I feel awful about how I acted. I feel awful that I subjected myself to a bad night's sleep. And I just feel so guilty about all that wasted time. In fact, if I think about it, if I was to sort of boil it down and concentrate it from my perspective and what I see talking with many people, is this guilt about the time that we're wasting, the precious time that we have in this one life that we are devoting and dedicating to something that we dearly would love to change, right? And all those days, all those weeks, all those years, and we've been doing that. And if we sort of really were just to sit and stack it up, how guilty would we feel? So there's all of that we're dealing with, and that can feel really heavy. And then we have thoughts about the present and the guilt attached to those. Things like, I should be doing something other than what I currently am. And this then also connects to before. If I had learned to knock this on the head before, I would have performed better at work, so my current job would be better, right? And it's I've only got myself to blame, right? We sort of go down that avenue. And by the way, when we start thinking in those terms, what do? We don't feel great, and so we drink. So just want you to be aware of that. Other thoughts about the present that will create a sense of guilt. Perhaps that right here, right now, you are listening to this podcast and you are hoping things will be different, but you are fearing that they won't. Now, if that is you, I want you to acknowledge it. I want you to see why that might be the case. It's because of all those failed attempts behind you. But please, please, please do not make yourself feel guilty because you are choosing to listen to this podcast. Much more to turn it around as I'm listening to Anna's podcast, because I know she gives me all the practical stuff and she's there supporting me, and this is the way for me to, I'm sort of really supporting myself, right? That is nothing to feel guilty about. That is something to cheer yourself on with. Another way that guilt in the present shows up is guilt that you don't want to drink so much, but you also know you just give in when you're in the moment. We can just see it coming out. We've got the plan. We're going to be alcohol free, or we're going to just be 2 glasses of wine, but we already know. We can already sense what's going to happen, but we feel that guilt right now, right? We feel the guilt before we've even had a chance to have the failure. Think about that. Until you've done something, you don't know if you're going to fail at it or not, but we're kind of already feeling guilty about, we know we're going to let ourselves down. But that's current in the moment guilt. And then we have all our thoughts about the future, right? So again, this is thoughts. This is like, I should serve this up as a dish. Thoughts 3 ways: past, present, and now future. How do these thoughts show up? Things like, I shouldn't do what I'm going to do, and I should be doing something else instead. Now that is a thought where we are really out of control. I mean, I want you to hear that we've given over our control to the alcohol, which we do not need to do, my friend. We are always in control, but we're thinking, I shouldn't do what I'm going to do. It's like, well, I'm on the slippery slope. It's inevitable. No, it isn't, but that's how we might think. We might have thoughts about our future that we might fear a less healthy future, or we're kind of just going to be showing up as a lesser version of ourselves if we continue down this road. And to emphasize that to ourselves and to reinforce it, we can just say, well, look what I'm doing right now today, and just look at what I did yesterday and have done for the last 30 years, right? So that kind of all reinforces that our future is preset and nothing is going to change. And we feel desperately guilty about that for ourselves and for our family and for our friends and just for our prospects in life. Kind of like when you look out to your future, you see more and more sameness, but perhaps just you're a little more unhappy, a little less capable version than you see today. And it is very easy to get consumed by this, to be consumed by your thoughts about your drinking. And I'm telling you, it's really interesting actually recording this. I do have something of a script. I obviously think my ideas out. I structure my thoughts for the podcast. But I've been ad-libbing a lot today because I've been able to go right back for myself how I was feeling. It's actually, I have a feeling in my body just talking about this. And that is for, I've been free of the drag of alcohol and all the thoughts about it for a number of years now. So this is a very real thing. I don't want you to think you're being stupid or silly or incapable if this is what you're struggling with. This is very, very real. But it doesn't have to stay like that, right? This is the good thing, right? So if you're feeling that you're consumed by your thoughts about your drinking or the time you've wasted or what you should be able to do, what you know you should do, but you're just not doing it, and what that means about your likelihood to change, just want you to accept that that can be where we get. Well, you don't have to stay there. Because ultimately, here's what all this means. If you flip what I've been saying, all this stuff that our thoughts from past, present, and future are what creates that sensation of guilt for us and how we act from that. If we flip that, it means that feeling guilty is within your control. Wonderful. Wonderful, right? I don't want you to go to, so why would I do that? That is nuts. We're going to start with feeling guilty is within your control, which means there is a guilt-free life with your name on it. You just have to learn how to live it, which is what I teach, right? I teach you how to identify the thought patterns, the belief systems that cause you to feel guilty. And then I show you how to dismantle and replace them so we extinguish the guilt altogether. Now, what does that mean specifically in terms of what action can you take? Well, you need ways to stop blaming yourself for feeling guilty, right? And actually that starts with identifying when you get into that pattern so you can get out of it. And you can do that today by becoming just much more aware. Another thing that this means specifically is it's all about understanding where you are assigning blame today and the guilt, to decide whether that is serving you in any way. Some people might say it is, and I want you to know you to question that. And if it isn't serving you, learning to create new ways of thinking that will inspire the feelings you need to take your desired action. However yucky this may feel at first, right? We often think if we're going to take action away from guilt, we're going to take action that is responsible and has us feeling determined and all those good things that we are going to feel great. No, at least not to start with, because this is going to be new to the brain. It is not going to like this, right? Remember, our brains are inherently quite lazy. They like to be efficient. They don't like to do new things. So finding new ways to think that have you feeling less guilty is a change. It's something you're going to need to focus on. It's not just going to happen. Now listen, I also want to add another side to this. I don't want you using this against yourself. You may also feel guilty that you're having to spend time, right? Having to spend time doing things like listening to this podcast. By the way, think about if you were to say, I'm choosing to spend time listening to Anna's podcast, how different that feels, right? You might feel guilty about hiring me to teach you how to drink in a way that you can take it or leave it. You might really want that, but be held back from that because thinking, oh my gosh, I just feel so guilty that I'm having to spend my time and my money to do that, right? It might feel very selfish that you're giving away those precious resources to learn how to do this. That could bring up all sorts of other guilt. And again, those feelings of guilt are coming from how you're thinking about this. If you think you should be able to drink like a normal person, you should be able to drink like everyone else appears to do, then you're going to feel guilty about coaching with me. And this may delay you taking action. But if you see this as a skill you are learning, a skill you're adding to your toolkit, a skill that's going to serve you well in life, and it will, by the way, beyond drinking, well, so what if no one else you know struggles with this, struggles to drink less or to take it or leave it? Side note, you will never truly know that. And the number of people I speak with who tell me they have spoken to nobody about this but me, if you think all those people must know other people, and there's a possibility that other people do struggle with this too, right? So that's just a story you're choosing to tell yourself. So instead of thinking, oh, I feel so bad that I'm struggling with this and nobody else does, you could decide that this is just something that's right for you, right? That this is you taking care of yourself. This is you going after what you want in your life. And this is you by creating this new version of you who's that much more capable around this. Think about the knock-on impact that's going to have on the rest of your life and the people around you and your relationships and so on. And if you think in those terms, you're going to have negligible guilt and you're going to be willing to take action. Which of these you are is a choice. I'm also going to add that what I teach will serve you way beyond just this one particular moment in your life, the next few months, and your relationship with alcohol. It's a relatable process that you'll master when working with me, and then you're going to learn to use it on your own for the rest of your life in all sorts of different areas. It's one of those things in life that once you're aware of it, you can't unsee it. You'll call yourself out whenever you start to slip into your old familiar guilt patterns. Listen, we spend so long imagining worst case scenarios in our lives. We're seeing our life not changing, seeing ourselves clinging more and more to this hamster wheel that we would dearly love to step off. Right? We spend so much time doing this that we don't have any brain space for any other scenarios. So let's do that. Let's do that right now as you're listening to this. I just want you to imagine for a moment a life with no guilt. What would that be like? What would be different? What would you get to do? What becomes possible? You may want to back this podcast up, go back a few seconds and note those questions down and answer them, right? Pen and paper, answer them for yourself, really see it, take it in. And all of that, accessing that different life is open to you. Will this mean that your life will just be a bed of roses and everything that you currently feel guilty about will just go away? No, and that's okay. Like I said on a recent podcast episode, life is always going to be a mixture of stuff you enjoy and stuff you don't. But when you learn how to ditch the guilt, you learn how to back yourself and take action, and then you become the person who's willing to take action and who's willing to drop the guilt, right? You become that person who does that with their thoughts. Because yes, sometimes it can feel hard, but that guilt piece, that is entirely optional. I see it as an unnecessary drag on your progress. It gets in the way of taking action. I talk a lot about feeling free around alcohol. Free as in you can plan what you'll drink and trust yourself to follow through. Free as in you know it won't solve whatever you're going through. And free as in you can be surrounded by it and that won't trigger you one bit. If you do all this, you create true freedom, the ability to imagine a future that's different from the one that you have now, and then to act towards making that future a reality. And when you drop the guilt, you will get there a whole lot faster. Thank you so much for listening. Please do rate and review the podcast. It helps others find it, and do share it with someone you love. And if you have any questions, you can reach me on anna@90dayslater.co. I have a couple of slots open right now in my one-on-one coaching calendar, so why not grab them? And then you can be guilt-free. Okay, I'll see you next week.